Do you believe in spirituality? Are you more religious? Or do you consider yourself spiritual? Or, what makes people spiritual versus religious? We're going to get into that today. So, it's your man, Mike DeLoach. So, just sit back, relax, as we give you some of that. Welcome back to the channel. It's your man, Mike DeLoach, with a black man in New Mexico. So, if this is your first time, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, hit that notification bell so you'll be sure to get notified whenever those new videos do drop, okay? So, again, welcome back to all of my current subscribers. Thank you for coming back and checking out some more content. So, the question was, do you believe in spirituality, or are you religious, or what makes someone spiritual versus religious? And I'll start off with me growing up. Growing up, I guess you could say I was considered religious. I grew up in the church. I went to a Baptist church. And every second and third Sunday, we're pretty much, in church. The second Sunday was the youth Sunday, so I was in the youth choir, so we would sing on the second Sunday. And third Sunday was more of when the, adults sang in the choir. And that's when you had the main pastor of the church that would come and speak, And so, back then I really had no choice. You know what I mean? I just kind of had to go because my family went. It's like, hey, get up, get ready, we're going to church. No questions asked or whatever. That was the thing. And it was kind of more of a way of life, and we'll touch on that a little later. But it was like a way of life, and you hear a lot of people say the term, I would do this religiously, or go to, you have some alcoholics that go to a certain bar religiously, you know what I mean? Or people who smoke, they may smoke every morning religiously, you know what I mean? It's a habit, it's like a way of life. But mainly I was excited to go because I come from a big family, so that's when I got a chance to see all of my cousins and hang out kind of with my cousins. That's kind of how we looked at church, like it was just a big meeting for us to hang out, But back then I really didn't understand the church in a spiritual sense. Granted, church was always, went over the Bible, and, we talked about God and that higher power, But, again, I really didn't have that understanding when I was younger. And, it wasn't until I got older, and now, don't get me wrong, one of my grandfathers, my mom's dad, he was a Jehovah's Witness, so he was real big into the Bible. And, other than church, he would sit me down, and every time I go to his house, he'd sit me down and he'd read me a Bible verse. So he kind of, try to breathe that spirituality into me, because he would basically give me that parable that was in the Bible, and he would try to give me real life scenarios as how to apply it in my everyday life. So even though he was a Jehovah's Witness, and I didn't per se subscribe to the Jehovah's Witness at a young age, he tried to put it to me more in a spiritual sense. And, a lot of that knowledge didn't really start sinking in until I got older, and I got away from my, as you would say, religious background, And the way that I got away from that religious background it was when I moved here to New Mexico, So, again, I grew up in the church, and my good friend that I came out here, his family was, from that church background as well. So, they had churches that they would go to. So every now and then I would, go to the church that they was attending at the time or whatever. And then started dating, started dating a black girl, and, hey, and they were church oriented as well. So started going to church with her, you know. Now, it wasn't until then where I kind of seen more or less the blasphemy, you know, because again, when I was young, I was just going to church because I had no choice. Now, at this point, I'm choosing to, like, all right, this is what I grew up on. It's still available in New Mexico, so I would like to still, you know, to do that, to go to church and whatnot, you know. But now I'm older. Now I got a better understanding. Now I'm able to kind of see some of the things that my grandfather would talk about in that spiritual sense. But here it is. I'm trying to go about it. I'm going about it in that religious aspect by going to church. But for me, I just wasn't feeling this pastor. I don't know if any church people out there ever went to a church and, you know, they was hearing this pastor preach, and, you know, it seems like he's exaggerating a little bit, if you would. You know what I mean? But I got that feeling going to this church, like, dang, man, like, does he really believe in what he's preaching, you know? And within this time, too, um, I get a chance, I get an opportunity to meet an ex-pastor. Now, the circumstances that I meet this ex-pastor is, I say unknown, but from what I would think of a pastor, you know, I'm like, dang, you was a pastor? But anyway, basically, he came by, you know, um, and the way we met this pastor was, you know, a good friend of mine, his mom was like a substitute teacher. This pastor ended up being a substitute teacher. But the pastor was looking for some smoke. Just like on Friday when when Bernie Mac played the pastor, when he walked up the smoke, like, let me get a little hit. You know what I'm saying? It's like they was telling us then that, you know, these pastors, ordinary people, they smoke weed, they cheat and whatever, just like the ordinary man. And that was one thing that this pastor was able to tell us about. You know, here it was. He came over, he playing dominoes with us. He smoking with us, you know what I'm saying? But meanwhile, at this point in time, he's no longer a pastor. But he enlightened us as far as why he got out of being a pastor. And, you know, he explained to us like it's a lot of foolery, a lot of foolishness within the church. You know, you do have pastors messing with deacons' wives and stuff like that, you know, and so, or other women within the church, you know. So you really start to see how some of those pastors use that power that they have within the church to really kind of, you know, manipulate things for their advantage, you know. And so it was at that point where I more or less got out of the religious aspect of, as far as knowing that, or as far as thinking that I have to go to church every Sunday to be this Christian. You know what I mean? And at that point, that showed me that I don't have to go to church every Sunday just to be considered a Christian, especially if these so-called Christians are walking hypocrites. You know what I mean? And they're not living in that word. And again, it's a way of life, you know what I mean, versus whatever religion that you may follow. It's a way of life because they're saying one thing and living a different way. You know what I mean? So at that point, I started to look at things completely different, you know, and I even got into, you know, exploring other quote unquote religions, you know, just to see, you know, what's the message, because, you know, and where I'm from, like I said, it's mostly Christians, or considered Christians, as far as in the black community. You know, the white community may be considered Catholics. And that was the thing here. Coming to New Mexico, you don't have, I mean, you have some Christians, but the majority of the base of the community here is, I would say, Catholic. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, you have other people who have other beliefs, but if we're talking in the religious term, we'll say Catholics. You know what I mean? But again, I basically just started almost like unlearning everything that I knew about Christianity and really delving into this other things and relearning, and through my process of relearning, I noticed that, you know, there were certain common denominators, you know, and I think about Catholics and Christians, and when people who in the Mecca or Islam and pray to Allah, like for me, it just seems like there's everybody believes in this higher power. You know what I mean? Whatever religion that it may be, or even if you're into the Orishas or whatever, like granted there's multiple gods or whatever, but they still believe in this higher power, whatever the case may be. And so that's, I think, for me, where I started to take terms into more of a spiritual sense versus, that religion. You know what I mean? Because you have so many, like, different denominations or whatever. But for me, I feel like it's all under that same umbrella, if you would. You know what I'm saying? So I became a little more open minded. It's trying to understand other people's religions, other people's beliefs. Are there certain things that do coincide, which could kind of like almost debunk, um, not debunk religion in a sense. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of that stuff sometimes, I say a lot of that stuff, I believe a lot of religion um, is somewhat meant to enslave the mind. There's a book about, my homie just got a book about how um, basically the Bible was, and not to say the Bible isn't real, but how they were saying it was used as a mechanism to, to enslave the Negroes. Like Christianity was used as a tool to enslave, Negroes, and but basically it's used to enslave the mind. And sometimes I think that, it's the same way with other religions too, and I feel like it kind of limits the spectrum, as far as what true spirituality, really is, and being in tune, with that higher power. You hear a lot of people say, you know, it really just takes you to, to be in tune with that higher power, and you can have church among, 2 to 4 people. You can have church. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be this big congregation, But on the flip side of the coin, um, like, so on the flip side of the coin, you had some people who didn't believe in religion. Not to say they're antichrist or anything like that, but they just didn't subscribe to being a Catholic or a Christian. But at the same time, they may still believe in that higher power. There's there's something working behind the scenes, some unseen force that I have no control over, but it does play a part in my life. I do believe some people, um, like I say, still believe that, even though they don't go to church every Sunday, or excuse me, Bible study once a week, or 2 or 3 times a month in the church. When some of those people, their way of life is not hypocritical. They do what they say. They say what they're gonna do. You know what I mean? And they're not those, like say, walking hypocrites. Whereas you may have this person that's out there sinning Monday through Saturday, but on Sunday, what I'm saying, they repenting. A lot of comedians has made like little sketches or skits about, that stripper, that was in the club that pole dancing Saturday night, but in church Sunday morning. Or that one guy, on the flip side, that one guy who was at the strip club that Saturday night paying for a hooker, paying for a prostitute, but in that club, but in the church Sunday morning. Hell, some of the pastors may be the same way. May have been out Friday, Saturday night trying to pick up a hooker, but at the same time trying to preach the word on Sunday. Meanwhile, on Sunday, he eyeing, his next victim in the church, trying to point him out, and trying to, while he preaching, he talking to them, hoping they pick up a message. You know what I mean? But anyway, I think those people who don't subscribe, you ever heard of the term free spirits or free spirited? I think those people, who really don't subscribe to any type of religion or whatever, don't go to church consistently, but they're free spirited and they are spiritual. They do again believe that there is a greater power, this unseen force, you know. Um, but again, they're not hypocrites. And so these type of people remind me of like I say like the '70s hippie. Don't get me wrong, not all of those people like walk in that light or walk in that form of fashion or dress that form of fashion. But just that I feel like the '70s was that era that represented that freedom and breaking away from these confines of religion and whatever boxes that the government try to put people in. And even to this day, I mean, out here you got some people who still do what I call other drugs. You know what I mean? But things like your shrooms, your mushrooms, or LSD or your acid. Like I ran into some people who've experimented with these type of drugs. And where I'm from in a Christian community, they may look at these people as like they're not supposed to be doing stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, but here it is. These people who are doing these so-called other drugs, sometimes they've had or taken that drug to take them or show them this experience or this spiritual awakening, or just show them some type of enlightenment within themselves, something that they may not have seen before. And yeah, these people may do these other drugs, but that doesn't make them a bad person just because they did other drugs, especially if they're not out here, you know, being a hypocrite. If they walking it how they talking it, you can't say that those people are bad people, and you can't say that everybody who goes to church is a good person. You know what I mean? So that's why I think the religion should be debunked. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people just because a lot of people think just because they go to church they're gonna be saved or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But they may treat people like shit. They may be assholes. I just seen a meme on Facebook recently, or not a meme, but somebody reposted something that a server had said. But the server was like, after my 3 years of serving, one thing I can say without a shadow of a doubt is that the the meanest, rudest crowd is that crowd that you get on Sunday after church. You know what I mean? And that's sad. And again, that person said they waited 3 years before they even said this. But out of 3 years, they see that on a Sunday afternoon after church, that's when they get their most rudest people, and those are your church people. You know what I'm saying? But meanwhile, they don't know how to treat people whenever they go out, or they serve us like slaves whenever they go out to eat at restaurants and whatnot, and tipping maybe 10% or maybe not even tipping at all. You know what I mean? But that goes to show. But again, like I said, just because you go to church doesn't make you a good person, and just because you experience or experiment with other drugs, that doesn't make you a bad person. But you know, who am I to say what's right? You know what I mean? But I guess my thing is, whereas someone may be in the church and they've experienced this life changing event or whatever, and they credit it to the Most High or whoever they um, adhere to, or whatever the case may be. And my thing is, who's to say that that person who experimented with that other drug and saw something on their little spiritual quest doesn't have just as much of their testimony doesn't hold just as much weight as that person that's in the church. You know what I mean? So I guess my thing is, we can't deflect those people who are not per se in the church, as far as understanding the Most High. So, but like I said, the common denominator between it all, everybody believes in a higher power. You know what I'm saying? And someone told me that whatever a person believes is gonna reflect on their way of life. You know what I'm saying? And so you can see someone's spirit. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing. When you see somebody, it's not gonna have a stamp on their forehead to say I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic. You know what I'm saying? I go to this church, I go to that church, or whatever. When you see somebody, you're gonna see their aura, you're gonna see their spirit, and your spirit is gonna let you know, the type of person that that person is, whether they have, ill intentions or, hidden motives, or if they're, naturally genuine people, and are living within the spirit. So that's why I say, I think I became more spiritual than religious, and I think that's what made me more spiritual. And again, going back to those lessons that my grandfather would take from the Bible and give me in the everyday life scenario, you know what I mean? So, I'm thankful for him because he taught me at a young age, don't take it in a literal sense, is broken down in the parable. So be able to almost be able to read that spirit, you know. So, like I said, granted, he may have subscribed to Jehovah's Witness as a religion, but I do believe he was more spiritual than anything because it wasn't until later on in life where he got into Jehovah's Witness. When he was growing up, he was a sinner, and he'll tell you, he used to be out in the clubs, drinking every weekend, you know, trying to find, or mess around with women or whatever, but he didn't get on that path till later on in life, because he knew too, those same pastors that was pointing the finger, like I said, they had FOMO point right back at him because they knew the pastor was doing the same stuff that he was doing. But he wasn't going to sit here and try to act all holy and thou or like he was a Christian, you know? So, but yeah, I think I made my points. Just because somebody goes to church every day, that doesn't make them, or, go to church once a month, that don't make them a good person. And just because someone don't go to church, that don't make them a bad person. So keep that third eye open. You know what I'm saying? Look at things into, a spiritual perspective. Where don't dismiss that person who says they're spiritual and they're not under a certain religion. But because for me, the thing was, and I'll say this and I end it here, but like I said, growing up where I'm from, you had more. I grew up around mostly black people, especially in the church and Christianity, and like I said, it almost seemed like a black thing. But when I got to New Mexico, excuse me, I found a black church. It didn't sit right with me, So, and at that point, it's like, dang, So where do I go now, But I started looking around, looking at the environment around me. A lot of the environment around me was not black, you know, and they were of a multitude of different races, you know, and you had some different races who subscribe to, being a Catholic. I think it's funny with my piece, like with my piece on one side it's like the Saint Mary or whatever they call it, and on the other side you got the Jesus piece. You know what I'm saying? But those are like the main two religions that a lot of people subscribe to. But and I realized too, like a lot of Native Americans, they don't really go to church, but they have their spiritual beliefs, and they got some things that they practice religiously when it comes into how they deal with a death in their family and the certain rituals or whatnot that they may do at the time of the death, or that week leading up to the death or the week after the death, even down to their what do they call them? The feasts. They have their feasts like twice every year. You know what I'm saying? And even with like the babies, whenever the babies are born, if you're able to get the baby to laugh, the first laugh, you gotta pay for the party. You gotta pay for the first party. They call it the laughing party. So they had certain things that they done religiously. They had certain things that they done religiously. But they didn't always go into church. Whenever they had their dances, they had certain things. They didn't allow cameras whenever they do their dances. So they had certain things and certain practices that they follow. But they didn't subscribe to Christianity or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, like I say, and for me, that was the thing I think that brought it home with the spirituality because, like I said, a lot of people don't subscribe to what we subscribe to. You know what I mean? Granted, there's similar avenues, like Catholics. You know what I mean? That's like a similar avenue to Christianity. But some people didn't do that, but they were still religious and as far as certain things that they done. But beyond that, like I say, I had to see their spirit versus to what they try to portray to be. What people want them to be. You know, and just not being around a lot of black people. You know, running again. Once you see people, it's not going to be stamped on their forehead like, oh, Christian, Catholic. You know, I had to see their spirit and see how they move as a person. You know, and that's kind of what got me out of that religious mindset. You know, but just want to make this video for anybody, not to say for anybody who's confused about religion, but sometimes I think people debate that religion and spirituality, and for me having that religious Christian background and coming into a place where it's not so many of the black community to have more of a dominant culture in their Christianity. For me, and it allowed me again to break certain barriers that I was used to, and break down certain beliefs, break down certain ideas, certain ways of thinking, and it definitely changed, how I look at people, and it changed my, my thinking when it comes to spirituality, and definitely at this point in time, I definitely feel more spiritual, than subscribing to a certain religion, but just keep that in mind, hopefully my experiences help you see, why I, look at things more spiritual now. But if you got any questions, by all means, leave them in the comment sections. If you want to debate about it, by all means, put that in the comment section. I'll be sure to get back to your comments as soon as possible. And we can talk about it. But, let me know your thoughts. Do you consider yourself spiritual? Do you consider yourself religious, or if you are spiritual, what made you spiritual? Were you ever considered religious at some point? You know what I mean? But it's your man, Mike Deloach. Thank you all for watching. And again, if you haven't, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. And oh yeah, like the video so we can get the video circulating, through the YouTube world. You know what I mean? So other people can chime in and whatnot and so on and so forth. But until next time, we'll holler back.
That's in due time, but in the meantime, you gotta put in the work. You better get on your job. You better get on your job. I put in work. You better get on